Welcome to the Doctors Making a Difference podcast, where we help physicians to be empowered with the tools they need to be successful in medicine, in finance, and in life. Join us as we highlight doctors and other professionals around the world who are making a difference. Doctors change lives every day, but what happens when life changes yours? A single injury, a sudden illness, your career, your income, your future can shift in an instant. The best physicians don't just plan for success, they protect it. At Set for Life Insurance, they believe financial security isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. True own occupation disability insurance ensures that no matter what happens, your future stays in your hands. Because protecting your income means protecting everything you've built. Visit drpodcastnetwork.co/set for life today. Secure your future before life makes the choice for you. So today we're privileged to have Megan Missanelli here with us. Megan has the interesting background of being the daughter of an OBGYN and chose to become a gynecologist obstetrician herself. And not only that, but she has worked on innovation. She's working on a device to try to improve maternal fetal outcomes. She's worked in rural medicine. She has a wonderful background as a mother and a physician. And I think it's fascinating to hear about Megan's story. So I hope you'll enjoy this as much as I have. So Megan, do you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm Megan Missanelli. I'm MD, MPH. I'm an OBGYN down in Fairhope, Alabama, which is near Mobile. It's on the Gulf Coast. And I've been in private practice now for 6 years. And like you said, I am a second generation OBGYN. My dad was an OBGYN for decades. I think he says he delivered tens of thousands of babies. I don't really know how many. And yeah, I did follow in the footsteps. It's interesting. I don't know that he had a lot of influence over it, other than the fact that genetically speaking, the apple doesn't fall far. Turns out you
True.
have very similar interests to the people in your family, and not necessarily because they push you into that field.
That is interesting. Yeah, I wondered about that because I have kids, and I've got 4 kids, and 3 of them are in, well, almost. I guess the youngest one's 11, but the kids are all kind of in those teenage years, trying to figure out what comes next. And when they talk about what am I going to do, I don't know if I want to be a doctor. I don't want to be up in the middle of the night delivering babies like dad, or that
I
kind of stuff. And so, how did you choose to do that? Despite that background, kind of seeing what your dad had gone through.
Um, to be fair, he wasn't around a lot, and my mom mostly raised us because my parents split up when I was young. But he was always a doctor in my head. Like he was never, it was more like his career was first and his identity. And when I was going through school when I was younger, I really struggled to figure out what I wanted to do because I was a very well-rounded kid. I was in sports, I was in musical theater, I was a good student. So I really had the world at my fingertips. I could have chosen to do anything, and I did have a lot of varying interests. So then when I ultimately went to college, I was motivated to go to the school that I went to, which was a small liberal arts school in Alabama, Birmingham Southern, because I got a scholarship.
Right.
And I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I was like, well, I'll just go because I got money. And then I
Right.
got there and I think I really floundered. And I think it's important to mention that because even though I had a professional parent and, the expectation is you're going to college, you're going to be successful, not everybody's there at 17, 18 years old. And a lot of young people don't know what they want to do. And that's okay. You don't need to go straight through school. I really admire the European model. I think those kids that take gap years, I think that's huge. They encourage young people to go and work abroad or volunteer abroad. And I think at the end of the day, if I had done something like that, I probably would have gotten through school a lot sooner. But I ended up going to Birmingham Southern and I did not do well. And I made a decision to take a step back and take a year off and move across the country to California, where I lived as a kid, just so I could get my feet back under me. And I worked for a year and established residency in the state of California so that I could get in-state tuition and go back to school. And I think like what you realize when you're not in school for the first time in your entire life is I actually missed it quite a bit. It was like the first time in my life I wasn't doing math, and I like did really well in math and science all the time throughout school. And it was like the first time in my life I didn't have homework and I wasn't like studying. And I was like, oh God, I really feel like I'm going to
That's
mush. I need to get
interesting
back
that
in school.
interesting that you missed homework.
I did. It was weird. I was like, you get so used when you're doing calculus, you have to go home and like do all the work at home. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not doing math for the first time in my life. This is very strange. But I really commend California is a really great place to get an education. I have to say, I ended up doing the community college guaranteed admissions program. And I don't know if a lot of people are familiar with that, but I think it's a model that a lot of other states try to follow. They have a program where if you go to the community college consortium system and you maintain a certain GPA, you get guaranteed admissions to the school of your choice, either a UC school or a Cal State school. And I chose the UC system. And I got into several of the UC schools, but I ultimately chose to go to UC San Diego. And that's where I graduated from with my bachelor's of science in human biology.
That's cool. Well, and it once you kind of figured out what you wanted to do, obviously you were interested in science. Did you major in a science or
Yeah,
math?
I did human biology. And then I think part of it was like, I moved to California because again, I had a lot of different interests. And I was like, I really don't know what I want to do. But then when I got into UC San Diego, if you know anything about that school, it is a phenomenal science school. Like I think 30% of the student body is pre-med, um, if not more. And they have so much basic science, hard science, like you can work in a lab, you can do tons of research while you're doing undergraduate. They really encourage that. So when I got there and I was like, well, I don't know, do I want to do this major, this major? When you see all these people around you that are just so inspiring, like my chemistry professor won a Nobel Prize while I was in his class.
Oh, how cool.
It's just so cool. Yeah, so you get really inspired by all these innovators around you and like really intelligent people. And then that's ultimately, I was like, this is dumb. If I go to this school, I need to get a degree in a hard science because it will be a complete waste of my money if I don't. So then that's when I did human biology. And I really didn't, going through that, I didn't want to go to medical school. I think part of it, like we talk about with having a parent that is in medicine, especially OB/GYN, it is a little discouraging because you do see the lifestyle and how hard of a time they have with the lifestyle, but also the impact it has on their family. And when I was, you know, going through school, there was a class that I took that was really transformative for me. And it was by a professor named Dr. Gus. She was at UCSD. She was really inspiring, but it was a half virology, half sociology class. And it was about the HIV epidemic, the AIDS epidemic. And it was just eye-opening. And I realized all these people that were working in that field and doing, I was really interested in sociology and population health and global health. They were all masters in public health. So I was like, I think I want to do this first. And I want to know if this is where I want to go. So then I decided to go to grad school before I even decided to go to medical school because I was more interested again in population health. And I was like, I want to work for the WHO. I want to work for the CDC. So then I ended up in grad school at UAB for a master's in public health, and like more than half of the students I was in grad school with, they were doing an MD, MPH combined degree.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, and then you're like, okay, well then to really have an impact, you have to have the MD too. So then I finished my MPH and then did my MD. So I did it a little bit backwards. But again, I think it's just because it's hard when you have a parent, you see them struggling with their personal and professional life, like you like don't want to make the same mistakes. So I was like, I really dragged my feet deciding to go to medical school. But then like again, we say the genetics of it, like I found my interests to be very similar and I found my niche really in women's health. And I was interested in women's population health and global health and improving outcomes for moms and babies. And it's all things he was interested in. And we just arrived at it independently.
Huh. That's interesting. Well, we all go on this path, and when you go to, I mean, the whole point of going to college is to explore a bunch of stuff, and not a lot of people don't end up where they thought they were going to because they go there and they have this experience where you take a class and you're like, oh my goodness, that's the
Yeah.
coolest thing I've ever studied, and then you find something. So with you went into the same specialty as your dad, but I'm interested to see how that was. Again, you kind of took this circuitous route that maybe not straightforward. Did you find that it was kind of what you had hoped once you got there, or how did that experience go?
Yeah, I once I got into, going to grad school and doing the public health, population health, it is just being surrounded by intelligent people and people that are making a difference. And it's just really inspiring and motivating. And then getting into medical school, I'll be honest, I hated the first 2 years of medical school. I know a lot of kids are like, I love med school. I hated the classroom work. Like gross anatomy was great, but then I really thrived as a medical student in third and fourth year when you get to your clinical rotations. And I realized really quickly I only wanted to work with female patients. It happened really early in my third and fourth year. It really might have happened like first and second year. But, third and fourth year is the practical application of your knowledge. And I am just a much more practical person. So I think if I can confer any advice to people coming up, it's not necessarily how smart you are. Like I was a pretty middle of the road medical student, especially in the classroom. I thrived when I got to be hands-on with patients. You have to be able to have conversations with human beings. Like you have to go out into the world and be able to talk to people from all walks of life. And sometimes these young kids, when they go straight through, they've never worked a job. I encourage kids to work retail. Like you need to work in the service industry or retail industry. You need to do something when you're interacting with the general population because you have to be able to talk to humans and when you get into the clinical exam room with them. So yeah, like third and fourth year is really where you start to take off and you refine your knowledge and you figure out where you want to be. And I just fell right into it. It was a no-brainer for me. I wanted to do women's health. I was really interested in OB-GYN. My department really took me in and let me do a bunch of stuff with them outside of my clinical rotations. And then I ended up staying there for my residency too. So my medical school I did at University of South Alabama, and then I stayed there for my residency training.
So when you did residency at the end of that, you're in Alabama, you stayed in the state, which is a wonderful, tribute to the residency program that they were able to keep you in the state and all that kind of stuff. But do you still do the stuff with public health? Have you done any of your international stuff? I mean,
Yeah.
careers come in chapters, but I was wondering if you had already played that card or if that's a future chapter.
No, I think it's a future chapter, but what's really interesting is part of my public health education, you talk about the lack of resources in other countries, the both financial, physical, labor, and you look around South Alabama and it's no different than a third world country in a lot of places. And I realized that really quickly. I was like, wait a minute now. And I started to have a problem with international work in the sense that like, it's high and mighty of us to go somewhere else and tell people how to do things when we can't even clean up our own house. So I really wanted to focus on Alabama, women in Alabama, rural health, maternal and fetal outcomes here in the South. And I knew I would have a better impact here locally. And then, yes, maybe down the road, do more international work. And that's definitely something I want to work towards. But again, it was more about looking around me and realizing that there's a lot that needs to be done here first. So I work in a rural county. I'm in a larger area in a rural county, but we're the largest county in the state of Alabama. And we draw like 150, 300 miles away in some cases. We have some women that are traveling that far just for their obstetric care. We talked about earlier the story you had about somebody having to travel that far to get delivered. And like I do the same thing. I have to tell some of my patients, you need to come close to the hospital and you need to stay for the next week because your cervix is changing. I'm concerned you're going to go into labor. We need you closer to the hospital. So like these people need resources. They have to have somewhere local to stay. They need either a hotel room or like family close by. So yeah, the public health side of me just realized very quickly, like the Southeast needs some help and we need to stay here and help. And you're in Idaho, so you understand this. Like rural states just need doctors that are willing to stick around and do the work that needs to be done.
Well, and when you look at United States, we have these big urban centers, in different places, and a lot of people live there, and they get a lot of news attention, and a lot of the medical studies are done in those places where there's a population concentration. But the landmass of the United States is huge, and most people or most of our landmass is rural, and all the places that people enjoy going on vacation or you go travel, there's people who live there. And they may not have access to the services. So, I can totally relate, Megan. We live in this rural area. And like the story you referenced, a poor patient of mine that was traveling from out of town had her water break. And instead of being here for a kind of a scheduled, she was going to do a scheduled C-section. She ended up doing a VBAC at a little remote urgent hospital that had no physicians. It was just a PA. And it was in the middle of the night in the snowstorm, and it was this crazy story. And thankfully, everything turned out okay. But it's a story that is reflective of rural America, and there are kind of these OBGYN deserts so to speak,
Hmm.
where people don't have. I'm a family doctor, would deliver babies, but even among family doctors, it's a small little group of people that actually deliver obstetrics. And gynecologists, a lot of people leave the OB side of it and just do GYN. I feel like it's a shrinking pool of people that can do obstetrics, and then the number of people can do surgical obstetrics. How many hospitals still do that? Because a lot of hospitals have stopped doing obstetrics because of some of these factors. Yet if we all do that, we leave our poor patients, we go back, we rewind the clock 150 years, and we go back to the same kind of outcomes people were getting in the early 1900s, and it's terrible.
Yeah, I do. I think we're seeing that in the state of Alabama because I know I hear almost, monthly of a hospital system closing their obstetrics unit because the liability is just too large and they don't have physicians that they can recruit to the area. And we're gonna see worse outcomes. I think we already are, but it's going to get worse, I think, in the next decade, especially in the Southeast. Yeah.
Well, and the reason I think you and I can probably agree on this. The reason that I do obstetrics is because I care about moms and babies. I want those outcomes to be good. I would want my family members, my sisters, my aunts, my cousins, other people. I would want them to have excellent obstetrics and outcomes where they can come and say, okay, let's. It doesn't matter who's actually leading that charge, but someone's going to help you walk through this process. Because having a baby is a normal, healthy thing for an adult woman to do, but there are so many things that could happen along the way that lead to bad outcomes, and we know what works. And so it's disappointing to see how we've kind of removed OB from everybody else. Like, oh, that's a different risk category, so we're putting people at a higher insurance rate, or
Mhm.
we're taking it out of mainstream medicine. Only certain hospitals deliver babies, and like, goodness gracious, people have been having babies for thousands and thousands of years. We need to not make it like this special unicorn of a medical thing. Like, that should be something that if you go to a hospital, pretty much anywhere you go should know how to take care of a mom and walk somebody through labor and delivery, because we were all born, and that's the only way
I
humans.
know.
That's how it's got to be. And so it just, I mean, that's kind of a sidebar issue, Megan, but I care so much about moms and babies and outcomes, and so I'm glad that you're focused in on that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. There's like a lot of fear with just generalists or ER doctors with obstetrics. Like anytime you know this because you work in the ER too, but
Right.
like anytime somebody that doesn't know anything about delivering a baby and a mom rolls in and she's about to have a baby in the ER, it's like complete chaos. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Sometimes they just fall out and it's great when that happens. So just stand back
Sometimes.
and wait. Yeah. Yeah. Um, so I mean, yeah, it's something that like as my career grows, I want to be able to again help the women in the rural Southeast and see outcomes improve. And like you talk about the research at the larger institutions, yes, you're right. Like urban areas, they're just really sexy. Everybody wants to live there. They've got great hospitals. But one of the things that I've just been really interested in over the last, I guess, few years is the amount of research you see that is in these urban areas and how it completely neglects minority women. And you see all of this good data coming out, but none of the data is representative of the larger population as a whole. And right now I'm doing a program at UAB. It's on AI and medicine. And one of the things we're learning with AI and models is that the training data is not representative of the whole. And we're seeing the same things we saw in academic research, where you have like Mayo Clinic pumping out research, but it's largely white patients from the Midwest. We need some more research studies in the rural southeastern United States that's representative of the larger population.
Yeah, no, so I mean, there's a couple of points kind of threaded through this. One is that our training model needs to make sure we are training a broad swath of people who can deliver obstetrics across the United States. Another one is the regulatory environment. Why would a hospital um, choose to slash be allowed to close their OB services, to say like,
Right. Yeah.
sorry, we don't deliver obstetrics. They don't pay enough. They're too high a liability. We can't find doctors who want to do it. The regulatory environment in the state makes it difficult for us to employ OBGYNs or family docs that deliver babies. And so it takes it really from this very formal system to an informal kind of lay midwife sort of system where people are getting really variable experiences. And so that concerns me. And just one story to highlight it. Like
Yeah.
when I was in residency in Indiana, I had a great training. We had just such wonderful training across the spectrum. And so I would go moonlight in the ER in one of these other hospitals toward the end of my residency in the ER. And I remember I didn't realize when I started there that they didn't do obstetrics. And one time we had this poor laboring patient come in, and I'm like, okay, well, I delivered 3 babies this week. Let's go. No
Yeah.
problem. And then I had this this ER nurse it was a garbage bag. She brought me this garbage bag. This is our OB kit. I'm like, and inside, there was a bulb suction, and there was like
A towel.
a towel, an umbilical
Yeah.
cord clip. I'm like,
Yeah.
really? And they were just so anxious to get that person out of there in an ambulance down the road. And like, what in the world? I mean, like, this is a
Yeah.
hospital, right? We have oxygen, we have suction, we've got blankets, we've got sterile equipment. Let's deliver the baby, get everything here safe, and then can move the baby somewhere else if everything's stable. But we don't want to send a mom who's at 8 centimeters in an ambulance with a
Yes.
paramedic. And anyway, it was just kind of mind-boggling to me. And this was only 45 minutes away from where I was doing my training at a bigger hospital. And so
Hmm.
but the point is, we have all these barriers that I feel like are somewhat artificial, that we have allowed our system to create to make it harder for us to deliver obstetrics care, high quality obstetrics care, to women in rural areas. And it's something
Yeah.
that I feel like physicians kind of need to lead the charge, because I don't think our I don't know that our other policymakers and stuff like that really have the same level of understanding as someone who actually delivers babies.
Totally agree. That's funny you talked about the lay midwife thing because we're experiencing that right now in the state. They just approved lay midwifery for home deliveries maybe a couple years ago. But the problem is really there's this power struggle going on between midwives and physicians, and I think like people that are more on they're in line with like the natural birthing and home birthing and this like anti-Western medicine approach. And then you've got the doctors over here that are like, this is dumb because your outcomes are worse. You guys need to be in hospitals. And you really can't have this battle. You need to find some common ground because they're going to be, quite frankly, we need people probably delivering at home in this state because, again, we talk about the travel distance, the inability to get adequate medical care where they are. Well, okay, if you've got people willing to go out into the community to deliver that care, then we need to support that financially from the state's perspective. Maybe give them more education. Let's create like the UK system has like this army of nursing midwives that goes out into the community and it checks on moms and babies and it delivers at home. It's like nobody wants bad outcomes. We want moms delivering in hospitals, but you can't just close hospitals and then not give an alternative. So we've got to be able to work with everybody from legislators to midwives to nursing midwives to lay midwives and try to deliver some form of care to these women out into the community. And I have an experience like that. I had a patient that, well, you talked about it in the ER itself, but like I had a patient whose baby died because she chose to have a home delivery. And we don't want that to happen. We want there to be people that are educated, that are out there helping these women labor at home. And if they are choosing to deliver at home, recognizing when they are at their limits of their delivery of care and they need to get them to an appropriate facility. So I think it's really on both sides, but there needs to be some better conversations for sure.
Right. Well, and to my point I said earlier, I think it behooves us as physicians to become involved in the policy creation, because it doesn't do any good for us to compete and say, okay, all lay midwives are bad.
Right. Yeah.
That's dumb. It would be better to
Yeah.
say, okay, we have this common goal. Let's understand what this means, and then from the regulatory side, what's appropriate to the public? What's the level of training that we would want where somebody's coordinating with a larger center, and still honoring the desire to deliver at home and avoid a lot of intervention, because we probably the same thing you do, Megan. When patients come in to deliver, I always tell the moms, like, hey, you're the queen of the day. We'll do what you want to do,
That's great.
but I'm going to talk you through every decision. I'm not, I had one patient that was so worried. I don't want you to do the cascade of interventions. So no cascade of interventions.
Yeah.
I'm like, hold on, if you're not in jail, only thing, every decision we decide to talk about, I'm only going to recommend it if there's something going on, and you and I will talk about that. Sometimes
Yeah,
things happen
exactly.
speedy in obstetrics, but it's just you and me. There's nobody else whispering over my shoulder telling me what we have to do. It's going to be us. And I want the kind of that same mindset for our midwife colleagues and others to say, okay, here's the things that make sense. And when you spot a red flag, you need to know what it is and need to know
Yes.
what the evidence says to do on that. When everything's delivering great and the mom is totally healthy and they're fine, we don't
It's
need
fabulous.
fabulous. We don't need the
Yeah.
interventions. I'm on the phone. I'm a phone call away if you need me, etc. But you don't. But we do have to kind of make it so that these policies and the way we interact with this obstetrics team isn't adversarial, but is instead collaborative. And I think we would get better
Mhm.
outcomes. But the problem is, I know in Idaho, our legislators aren't medically trained, and so we come up with a lobby group that says, hey, we want to allow lay midwives to do this, or we want to allow hospitals to do this, and we make policies that ultimately end up creating all these barriers for women
Mhm.
to receive high quality care. So anyway, I know it's kind of a sidebar, Megan, but I'm pretty passionate about it because I want excellent outcomes. Like nothing else really matters. We were all born, like I said, and I would want someone there to be able to deliver the next generation of babies and have those excellent maternal and fetal outcomes.
Yeah, same. I think I pride myself on my obstetric care. I have a very low C-section rate. I have an extremely low primary C-section rate. I can count on two hands the number of episiotomies I've cut in the last 6 years.
Right.
Same thing with vacuum deliveries. I just there's a lot of shift because we have a lot of younger women graduating residency programs, and I think we're all childbearing age that we want to see this taken back out of the hands because a long time for a very middle of the century, it was a lot of old white men making
It
decisions
was,
for a
right.
lot of women. And that, it's not to say that like they were all evil, awful people, but there was a lot of decision making that did not take a woman's body and longevity into account. And there was like routine episiotomies cut and forceps deliveries all the time. And now things have shifted and we are more hands off and we are more interested in low risk deliveries and what can we do to like make this a better experience for moms overall. And I tell my patients all the time, I'm like, you can do whatever you want. I just need an IV. That's it. I just
Right.
need IV access, and you can roll around on the ball. You can get in the shower. We don't have to
You can tell them my queen of the day thing. You're the queen of the day. Whatever you want.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm never going to make a decision in this process without talking to you first. And I can also count on one hand the number of stat C-sections I've done, and we deliver 32 weeks and up at my hospital,
Right.
and we have since I've been here. So there's just we all need to just take a step back, take a breather, involve moms in the decision-making process, and everything kind of works itself out, you
Yeah,
know?
no, I think it makes sense, and I love that you're focused on that, Megan, because it is good like outcomes, and I like the idea that's collaborative and conversational, and I hope we'll remove the stigma from patients a little bit. That if I go to a hospital, I'm gonna have all these things done to me, and when you go there,
Mhm.
you hope you sit down with your doctor and be like, okay, well, what works for you and for your baby, and you're right, the number of stat C-sections where somebody's abrupting and the baby's dying, and I mean those are horrible. We've all been a part of those,
Mhm.
but those are pretty rare, thankfully.
Yeah, they are
So,
very rare.
but
I even like teach my patients the tracing. Like if I'm
oh
sitting
yeah,
there and they're on the monitor, I'm like, look, we're gonna look at this. And I like educate them on what's happening. I'm like, this is why we're doing what we're doing.
yeah,
This is why we can do intermittent monitoring on you. So as long as baby looks like this, you're good. We'll put
yeah.
you on for 15 minutes and take you off. And then you can walk around and do what you want to do.
Well, and to that point, sometimes we sometimes I've found that moms who have delivered in a big medical center where there's 25 patients laboring on the labor deck versus
Hmm.
coming to a smaller facility where you might be just one or two of you in labor at a time. It's a different experience, and most moms enjoy that, a little bit
Yes.
more attentiveness, a little bit more time. But I think our outcomes are equally good, and I think we can distribute that outcome model across the state, and even with the midwife model, if we do some appropriate training so that people don't feel like they're at odds with physicians, but in collaboration and kind of knowing when to intervene and when not. And that's anyway. This is a big national
I know.
discussion that needs to happen, but it's like,
We're going to
well,
solve all the problems and we're
yeah,
yeah.
but it's to the point. This podcast is for physicians, and if you're
Yeah.
a physician and you have the ability to get involved in policy creation or get involved in your state medical chapter or run for politics, I mean, we need more doctors at the policy making table because these kind of decisions aren't made appropriately when we have people who are just lobby groups rather than people who are actually decision makers who've worked on the clinical side of medicine.
Yeah, and at the hospital level too, just the administrative part of it, like we want to see physicians have similar outcomes because if you have one physician that's an outlier that's having excellent outcomes, but your patient population is the same, then you need to be able to look at all the physicians and be like, okay, this is somebody who's leading by example. What are they doing differently from you that you can change your practice to have better outcomes like they have? And there just needs to be a little more interaction from like a hospital administrative standpoint to include all the physicians and make sure everyone's on the same page and everyone's practicing evidence-based medicine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally
Um,
agree.
yeah, because I mean, we just had our maternal and infant committee meeting, and there's one physician in particular at another sister hospital to us, and the episiotomy rate is still like 50 to 70%.
Oh my goodness.
And
Wow.
it's like 0% at our hospital, or like one, very, very low. And there, you have to be, as a physician, willing to take criticism and change your practice as evidence changes. And you need to you need to put the ego out of it. And I think that's where one of this particular physician has a problem. They don't want to be told what to do by somebody else. We're like, well, to a degree, but you need to be able to change your practice as times change too.
Yeah. No, I think that behooves all of us to step back once in a while and say, am I the ego person?
Yeah.
Am I that person? Because it hopefully you go into this to help patients, and
Yes.
and if that's the root of the goal is to help patients, hopefully you'd have enough humility to say, well, if the outcomes are better by doing this intervention, I'll do that thing because I want the outcomes to be good, not so much because patients want to honor me as their doctor, but rather I want excellent outcomes. They didn't pay me just for to give them all my opinions. They paid me
Right.
to bring evidence-based medicine to their situation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well,
Totally.
so Megan, talk with me. Just kind of shift gears for a second. You mentioned you're a mom, and you went through before we started the podcast. You talked a little bit about the challenges of going through residency training and stuff, trying to kind of fill both roles as a parent and a resident. And I think I mean, I had kids when I was in residency, but it's different, I think, as a woman than as a man. And I want to hear just kind of how that experience went, because it's not always linear. It's challenging, and certainly there's lots of people who have had similar experience. I wanted to hear if you're willing to share a little bit of your experience.
Yeah, sure. So I got married when I was in medical school, and I had my first kid my fourth year of medical school, and then my other two while I was in residency. And really, by and large, the messaging you get as a female going through the medical training program in the United States is you need to delay childbearing. You cannot do both. And if you know me more on a personal level, I very much don't like being told what to do. So when somebody's like telling me that I need to live my life a certain way, I'm like, that's bullshit. You should be able to have kids when you want to have kids, and the system should support you doing that. And we shouldn't be telling these women that they can't have kids if that's what they want. And I know a lot of people. I have a lot of friends that they delayed childbearing, and now they're in their later half of their 30s or early 40s, and they are now dealing with infertility issues. And I think the data shows that women that go through medical training in the United States have like a much higher infertility rate. So it was a double-edged sword. Having children, again, I was very much there. I was ready. My husband and I were ready. We had kids. I had excellent outcomes, I have to say. If I did not, it would have been probably disastrous, and it would have derailed my entire education, because I had my second kid when I was in my second year of residency. And anybody will tell you in OB/GYN residency, second year is a terrible time to do it. You're like
It's hard.
you're running the board, you're doing more 24-hour calls than you ever were, that you ever will in all of residency. But I did it, and I had a excellent vaginal delivery, no complications. But at the same time, I had a residency coordinator that was not really engaged in how to support young women having children. And I had to come back to work after 3 weeks.
Hmm.
And I had to go back postpartum 3 weeks to working 100 hours a week. And I look back on it now and I say that to people, and it seems like another world and totally bizarre that you would have to do that. And I tell patients that, and patients are asking me for 12 weeks. And I'm like, sure, whatever you need. I will give you as much time postpartum as you need
You're
to
very
recover.
compassionate on that.
Yeah. And then I tell them I had to go back at 3 weeks, and they're like, well, how the hell did you do that? And like, I really don't know. I have an excellent support system. But if I was, I had a lower income, I didn't have a husband who was in his professional career and had a decent lifestyle and like quality of life, then we wouldn't have been able to do it. And I had family support too. So again, it goes back to like women in the Southeast that don't have resources, that are lower income. We're asking women to do a lot. We're not giving them a lot in return. And we're not supporting them as much as we should. But yeah, I had my second year of residency, my third and my fourth year of residency. And I remember going to like a board review course and I had like a 4-week-old baby on me and I was in a room and you get nervous as a mom when your babies cry. You're always like, oh my God, they're annoying everybody. But I went into that room and I was like, you know what? This is a room full of OBGYNs that are about to take their board exam. If they're going to get mad at me for my baby crying, they need to look at themselves and not me.
Well, that's
So
true.
yeah, I just sat in the back of the room and breastfed my baby when I needed to, and yeah, it worked out. But again, I think the important thing is like we need to be encouraging young women to fulfill both their professional and personal lives because we need more women out in the workforce. This is where this whole work from home debate gets into with women is like it let more women enter the workforce than ever before because they were able to balance their work and home life. Um, so yeah, I did it by the skin of my teeth, but somehow got through it.
Well,
Yeah.
that is amazing, Megan. So if you were a residency director now, or if you have that opportunity later, how would you do that? If because again,
Yeah.
about 50% of docs are men and women, and of course,
Yeah.
like, I think it's dumb when we tell people like, sorry, you have to delay your childbearing for 10 years, but we don't know what your health is going to be like. We don't know what your
Right.
fertility is going to be like.
Yeah.
Because, it's a job. Like, at the end of the
Yeah.
day, I love what I do, but I'm first a dad and a husband and
Mhm.
a family member, and I'm a physician. But that and I'm passionate about what I do. But it is a job, so you hate to tell people in training, sorry, you can't do these most important parts of your life, because people then at the end of it they feel like they've been told what to do, and maybe you feel a little bit unfulfilled and shallow. And I think it is wrong for somebody else on the outside to tell you how to time and have your family. Like that, it
Yeah.
seems crazy, ludicrous that somebody would tell you that you must do it this way.
Yeah. I think first and foremost, residency training needs to change to focus on quality and not quantity. Had I needed more time off in my second year, I would have been penalized and forced to stay on beyond my 4 years of residency and complete additional training in order for it to be considered quote unquote adequate. So I think we need to have better measurements along the way for quality of resident and their accomplishments and their milestones that they're meeting, as opposed to just straight numbers like how many vag hysts do you do, how many abdominal hysts did you do, right? Then I think residency training programs need to provide childcare. End of story. I think that if you are a residency program in the United States and you are not providing childcare for your residents, you are behind the times. And there's larger institutions that are doing that, but apparently this is a struggle at smaller institutions. And I think we all need to figure out a way to make that happen because if you had childcare on premises, it would improve outcomes for the moms and the kids. And then I think again, allowing for more time off. If I was a coordinator, I would absolutely support my residents in taking the time off that they needed to be adequate to be able to bond with their baby, to arrange for childcare if they needed to, just supporting everybody every step of the way and not ever getting in their way to achieve their goals. I think those are small changes that need to be made across the board for residency training in the United States for sure.
Uh, so if somebody I don't know if there is a method. Is there a way where someone says, look, I needed to be off? Because especially if somebody had kind of a complicated course
Hmm.
and they needed to be off for 6 months. I'm not sure how the regulations work at this point. Would somebody be able to supplant those 6 months or a year, or whatever it takes, and add the extra time at the end of their current residency, or do they? How does that work at this point?
I think it's not very clear. So in my case, I would have had to add it on, but I would have probably had to complete an additional year because then I would have had to wait until the next seating for the board exam. So you end up staying on for an additional 12 months just because you have to sit for the board exam. Or, yeah, there's some sort of hybrid where you would end up staying on for additional training. And then once you were finished with that training for 3 to 6 months or whatever it was, then you could be hired on in more of an employee role as opposed to a residency employee role. But by and large, it would have just been extra time and you wouldn't have been able to go out and start your practice or get your job where you wanted to get it. Um, so yeah,
Yeah, I think when I've talked to other people about it, it seems like the the goal would be adaptability, to say like, okay,
yes,
this, let's just make it work for you, and perhaps that means time off, or some more breaks during the middle of it, and perhaps that
yes,
means the ability to add time at the end, or to replace that training, because I don't want to have somebody come out of training and say, well, they missed a year of training because of family concerns, but we're still going to pass them. You want to say, okay,
right,
we've met the quality parameters, we've met the numbers and the time parameters, but we didn't make them wait a whole extra year. They had to add 6 weeks, but we were still able to get them on, or they
Right.
had to add 6 months, but they otherwise their life wasn't delayed by a whole year. So, right, there's kind of some inflexibility on board timing, and all these
Hmm.
everything's kind of set up in a July 1st start model for residents, and
Right.
it's hard to adapt when in our current setting where you have people that are off track or a little bit out of cycle, because there's just not much flexibility. And so it would be nice to have the idea that we're going to make this work rather than you need to work around us.
Yeah, and I think again that's where the focus needs to shift from quantity to quality. Like somebody may finish and have all their numbers, but they're a terrible surgeon. But
Right.
nobody along the way corrects their surgical skills because we're focused on them just getting their numbers. And same thing, like if your quality of your surgery is excellent, just because you didn't achieve the, number of vag his, I feel confident after seeing the ones that you did that you are capable of doing this going forward. That kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Well, and like we hinted out earlier, all of us need to be humble enough to be lifelong learners. I think about how much I've been here for 14 years in my little practice, and I think about what I knew at the end of residency and all that, and I I think I knew more. I think I thought I knew more than I did, and then after you get humbled, after you do it for a few times, you're like, man, that was hard, and
Yeah.
and you work and you get humbled, and then you realize you didn't know what you didn't know. And it's
Yep.
not that I had an inadequate residency. It was a wonderful residency, but there's
Yeah.
only so much you can learn in residency, and you have to
Yeah,
do the numbers,
absolutely.
and you have to have the confidence to say, okay, I'm at a good level on this, but I'm going to continue to be a lifelong learner, be humble enough to take direction, and I'll get better and learn from my colleagues, and
I think we all need a healthy dose of imposter syndrome. Like if
yeah,
you go through life and you don't have a little bit of imposter syndrome, then something's wrong.
no
Because
doubt.
I feel like I'm the dumbest person in the room. I never ask questions. So I'm like, oh my God, somebody's going to be like, why the hell are you asking that question? Like you need a little bit of that every single day of your life because then it makes you, it just, yeah, you're right. It keeps you humble.
It's good for us. Uh,
Yeah.
well, I do want to talk about this. So you have not only been engaged in like the patient care part of it and trying to deliver care to this rural area, but you we talked earlier, and you've been engaged in also trying to help improve fetal outcomes, and I want to hear about that project. Regarding fetal
Yeah.
monitoring, and you said it was a project your dad had worked on a little bit, and now you're into it. So
Yeah.
I'd really like to hear a little bit about that. Tell us
Yeah,
what's
so my dad has been working on some iteration of a fetal pulse oximeter for the better part of my life. And he has thus far been unsuccessful. I think there's various reasons for that. But bottom line is, we only have one way right now to monitor a baby and the well being of the baby during labor, and that's the fetal heart rate. This was heralded in the 1960s when it was brought to widespread practice that it was going to eliminate cerebral palsy. Okay, well, we're going to know what the heart rate of the baby is, and then we're going to know when the baby's in distress, we're going to be able to intervene, and we're going to completely eliminate cerebral palsy. Well, decades later, we're still using it, and we know how imperfect it is because it did not eliminate cerebral palsy and it just increased C-section rates to the tune that they were the highest they were in the 1990s. And we had to go, okay, guys, we got to back off and figure out why our C-section rate's so high. So we need to get better at interpreting this tracing. Well, we're still not great at it. If you have taken the OBGYN board exam, the ABOG board exam, how you study for this is you learn category one, which is associated with normal fetal acid base status. And you learn category three, which is associated with abnormal acid base status. And then there's just all of this junk in between, and it goes into category two.
right.
And you can have all of these adults in the room. You've got the mom, you've got the nurses in the room, you've got the doctor in the room, and all of these adult humans, you can get all of this vital sign information on, including their pulse ox, their heart rate, their respiratory rate, their blood pressure, their temperature. And right now, we're still using, decades later, just one variable to objectively determine what's going on with the baby. So, again, my dad has been working on some sort of device to look at the pulse oximetry of the baby while the baby's in labor. So, what's the oxygen status of the baby? And we have had the concept for a long time, and there was a device that was invented in the early 2000s, or late 90s, and it was the first fetal pulse ox. And it was a device that was very bulky. It had to be placed on the fetal cheek. It was difficult to place for one. It could only be done by trained physicians. And then they had outcomes that were not great. They were looking specifically at the primary outcome of let's fix the C-section rate because in the 90s, the C-section rate was so high. Okay, well, let's get more information. Let's try to drive the C-section rate down. So the initial study for the device did show that it improved outcomes in terms of determining a C-section for the fetal status, but it ended up increasing C-section rate for what they called at the time dystocia, which was basically failure to progress. But then there was debate about whether it was failure to progress because the device was so bulky, or was it because we were using a different definition of labor? Back then, we were using the Friedman labor curve still, and now
Right.
we're using the Zane curve. So 6 centimeters is considered active. We're giving first-time moms a lot longer in labor to get to that 6 centimeter inflection point. So yeah, it's finally at the point where the device concept is in lockstep with technology. And the first iteration that we've been working on for the last, the most recent one that we've been working on for the last few years is an intermittent device that uses reflective technology to determine the fetal oxygenation when you put it on the baby's scalp. You only need 1 centimeter of dilation. And we have been battling the FDA. The FDA it's been difficult to navigate this with them. They have determined that anything that is used in labor and delivery is going to be class 3. So it puts you down a different regulatory pathway that is just much more difficult. And that's really where that one got hung up. So now, over the past 6 months, we have a new device that we're developing that would actually use existing technology, which is the fetal scalp electrode. So instead of being an intermittent device, it's a continuous device. And it would still use light reflective technology to determine the oxygen status of the baby while the baby's in labor. So the point is we need to do something else. We're stuck where we are. We need to invent, and we need to try to create and do something different in labor to get more vital sign information on the baby to help us make better decisions. And that's where it gets really kind of dicey with the FDA, because this focus of the NIH is improving maternal and fetal outcomes. Well, we're trying to invent and we're trying to create, and we want your help in creating these things to get more information. If at the end of the day we don't have any improvement, then we don't, but we need to try. And that's the point. And so that's where we are. My business partner, Kirk, and I, we've created this device. We just started this company within the last 3 to 4 months, and we are now in the early stages of fundraising. And then we'll get to manufacturing and hopefully get to a feasibility study with the FDA. And we're developing our scientific advisory board. We've got a couple of awesome maternal and fetal medicine specialists that are contributing to that. So we're pretty excited about it.
No, it's like it has the potential to really help. And like you said, if I on my non-OB, if I had to rely just on heart rate on my ICU patients, my hospitalized patients, it would be hard to make proper choices. Like, well, I don't know what their oxygen level is. You can kind of
Yeah.
you can say it based on their heart rate, and certainly for people in sepsis, fast heart rate is an indicator that could be going on. But it's one of multiple parameters we use. So it would be wonderful to have more data. What's on a normalized pulse oximetry reading for a baby, and something that is minimally invasive. We know fetal scalp electrodes have been used forever successfully. So if there was something that was that minimal of an invasion, to the baby, that could really give us that kind of data, especially on a high risk delivery,
Yes.
that would be wonderful to have.
I think ultimately having some sort of intermittent device that we can use periodically to check the oxygen status of the baby would be great. But I think getting us away from continuous monitoring to get to that point, we need something to bridge the gap, because you're not going to have physicians out in the community getting rid of the continuous monitor. We talked about how the liability is so great. Well, that proves to be the point with physicians in private practice, is that they're scared and they don't want to just stop continuously monitoring a baby. They're even nervous just to do intermittent on low risk. So we need something that's in between. And if we can get heart rate information, if we can get temperature information, if we can get oxygen information, just any more vital information on the baby during the labor process, then hopefully it will help us make better decisions in the long term. And I think, when this would be really useful is, like we talk about, getting out into the community, getting more tools to midwives, nursing midwives, lay midwives, anybody. If we're gonna get home monitoring things to patients so that they can give us stuff like wearables at home, like these are tools that, yes, hopefully in the long run can help us improve outcomes for moms in the communities, because we'll have more vital information from them at home.
Yeah, no, I love what you're doing. So tell us how, I mean, me or of the hundreds of people that will listen to this, how can we get involved? Because I think this is something that's important. And whether you do obstetrics or not, this is important. Again, we all start this way. We all have to have a successful delivery for life to begin. And so if when we
Mhm.
talk about these outcomes, it's more than just what's happening in one hospital, one place. This has the potential to affect people worldwide. And so I'm really interested to hear what kind of what's the next step.
Yeah, that would be the goal. I mean, I would love to see this deployed worldwide, but ultimately right now, it's something that over the previous company where we were working on the intermittent device, I find that there's a lot of people that are looking for like the med tech unicorns and they're in the business world and they don't understand the practicality of some of this med tech technology. And like, I think there just needs to be more physicians involved in the creation and fundraising and investment of these devices because we're the ones that are going to be using it. It's going to be because we see the practical advantage of these things. And it's not just some guy in Silicon Valley like, oh, this is the next cool thing. Like, I want physicians to be involved from the ground up in from like concept to creation to investing to deployment to studies, everything. So really at this point for our company, we're just in the early stages of fundraising, but we really want to get doctors involved in that process.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. How do doctors get involved?
Yeah, I mean, investing, obviously, but then like the scientific advisory board, like we want maternal and fetal medicine specialists that believe in this to be on our scientific advisory board to get our name out there to help us deploy at least nationwide when the time comes and be able to do a widespread study that's like a multi-center national trial. But really just investing, we want to get like a community of doctors involved from the ground floor investing their money in this so that they will see the outcomes both monetarily but also from a clinical standpoint. And long term, we see improvement in maternal and fetal outcomes.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So if somebody wants to invest with you or get involved in this, how do they get a hold of you? What's the best way?
I guess you can just email me or call me. I have all my information. I can give it to you. Obviously, you have it, so we can put it up on the website or wherever you
Yeah,
want
I
to
can
put
put
it.
it in the show notes. I just want to
Yeah.
highlight it a little bit.
LinkedIn
So,
too. LinkedIn's a great place to get in touch with me.
okay.
I'm going to ACOG in May, so I'll be there talking to people. I have a couple of grant opportunities coming up. Again, this is where I think like NIH grant money. We've talked about before how what's going to happen right now with the way things are being defunded, but like the NIH grants for maternal and fetal medicine, like this is a huge point for them over the next decade. Is they want to see improved outcomes. So like we're chasing down some grant money. And then some private grant money too that's like some smaller groups, but yeah, I think ultimately just get in touch with me through
Yeah.
email or
Yeah, so
yeah.
I'll put some of that information, contact information for Megan in the show notes, especially like, LinkedIn's a good way to get all of us as professionals connected.
Hmm.
But I think we have to start somewhere, and there's
Yes.
doctors. There's just really only so many doctors that are working on this. And Megan, I think it's cool that you're right at the ground level, and it's also kind of neat that you have this legacy of working with your dad a little bit. He's been working on the same technology, and worldwide, this would be a wonderful tool, especially for, like I say, for high risk pregnancies. The ability to just have more reliable data. We don't want to do things that are going to make us have a higher C-section rate or put us at additional liability or all these other practical considerations. But the ability to have better outcomes is
Hmm.
crucial.
Yeah, internationally speaking, we did a small study in Nairobi, and what's important in those international settings, and even like in low resource settings in the United States, is yes, low resources. So you need to be able to judiciously use your resources and not just call a C-section and use all your tools that you have in your hospital because you have limited tools. So getting more information to the physician or nurses monitoring the labor process, we need to try. We need to do something. So we're just trying. And again, in the end, at the end of the day, if it's not working, fine. That doesn't matter to us. What matters is that we are making an effort, and I have clinical expertise to be able to do that. And that's why I think doctors need to be more involved in innovation because we're the ones sitting there and we're going to say this is going to work, this isn't going to work, and people in a room that have no clinical experience can't do that. So doctors need to be, and I felt like we talk about imposter syndrome. I definitely felt like I'm not a business person. I'm not in the business world, but I've learned so much over the last few years doing this. And I'm like, well, wait a minute now. I do actually have a lot of good things to say about this stuff. And I can bring some innovation to the table that other people can't because I'm doing it day in and day out. So that's it. I just encourage other doctors to do the same. Like think about problems that you can solve in your own practice and connect with the people that can help you solve them.
Oh, that's such good advice, Megan. I appreciate it. Well, do you have any other parting words? Because I feel like this has been a fun thing to kind of walk through your journey and hear about your innovation and talk about kind of all the things we can get involved in as doctors. And I've really enjoyed it. I just wonder if there's any other things you would want our audience to know.
I don't think so. Just if you're not on the path that everyone else has followed, it doesn't mean it's the wrong path. It's the right one for you. So it took me a while to get where I am, and I'm kind of all over the place, but it's working for me and it's working for my family. So just do what you feel compelled to do and be driven to succeed and don't listen to the outside noise.
Yeah, great words to end on. And I think that just to reflect on that for a second, you have a very powerful voice as a physician. Everybody that has gone
So
through
do
that,
you.
right? I'm just, but everybody that
Yeah.
has paid that price and said, look, I've gone through medical training and residency, and I have years of experience. There's just only so many of us, and when you use that voice to try to do good for other people, and when you are involved in working with other doctors, it really does carry more weight, more impact than you might think. And so the fact that we can get involved in a lot of different things like this is awesome. So if you're a person that feels compelled to do it and it's that time of your life to get involved, by all means, get started. So thank you, Megan, for sharing your story. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it too.
Yeah, I look forward to keeping in touch. Thank you.
Yes, thanks.
Thanks for tuning into the Doctors Making a Difference podcast. And thank you for what you do to help your patients and your community. Your work truly helps so many people. We produce this content to help you have the tools you need to stay in medicine and to highlight the amazing work being done by physicians around the world. Please note that while I am a physician, and many of the guests on this program are also physicians or other professionals, the discussions on this podcast do not represent my employer or any professional organizations to which I belong. This podcast is for your information and entertainment only, and should not be taken as professional advice. You should seek appropriate professional advice pertaining to your own situation. Please check out more of our content on our website, doctorsmakingadifference.com. Also, please follow, like, or subscribe on your podcast player or YouTube channel, and give us a 5-star rating. It really helps to spread the message. Finally, if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, or if you'd like to nominate someone else to be a guest, please visit the website or email admin@doctorsmakingadifference.com. See you next time.